On an ordinary Tuesday in London's family division courtroom, four felt like a filing cabinet, beige, airless, and indifferent to the lives crammed inside it. Barristers' droned papers fluttered, and the machinery of custody law ground on deciding where 3-year-old Amelia Rose Fletcher would sleep for the rest of her childhood, until the child herself broke the monotony with two impossible words. Clutching a weather-worn stuffed elephant arm, she rose on tiptoe, pointed past rows of startled solicitors, and whispered, "Safe, man." The phrase, softer than the fluorescent hum, sliced the room in two, freezing a battle-hardened guardsman in the back row and derailing Oliver Trent's flawlessly scripted case. What began as a dead quiet formality now crackled with hidden war zones, forged documents, and a predator in a designer suit. Thank you for choosing my video among thousands of videos out there to watch. Helping me with a subscription of yours is very small, but very big and too valuable. In that breathless instant, the court realized it was no longer judging a mother. It was confronting a conspiracy, and a dying soldier's promise had just spoken through his daughter. The family division of London's High Court had the ambiance of an underground bunker, windowless, beige, and lit by fluorescence that hissed like faulty wiring. At precisely 10:05, the custody hearing of Amelia Rose Fletcher dragged into its third day, advancing by inches through motions and affidavits. On the left sat Elena Fletcher, 34, widow of Staff Sergeant Harry Fletcher. Fatigue hung on her like a damp cloak, yet she still wore her wedding ring as if it were battle armor. Across the aisle perched Oliver Trent, financier turned savior, in a navy suit so immaculate it reflected the ceiling lights. His unnerving composure suggested he had already rehearsed every gesture he would make. From the public gallery, a lone figure watched Lance Sergeant Kieran Halt Coldstream, guard's shoulders squared by 18 years of hauling kit and grief. Off-duty and out of uniform, he blended into the woodwork, yet the disciplined scan of his eyes betrayed a soldier's vigilance. 5 years earlier, on a heat-shimmered airstrip in Kandahar, Harry had shoved a battered stuffed elephant into Halt's hands and extracted a promise. If the worst happened, be the safe man for his wife and child. Now that unerasable order vibrated in Halt's head while lawyers debated whether Amelia's future should be spelled Putney or Surrey. The child herself occupied a front-row chair beside a court guardian, feet not touching the floor, posture preternaturally straight. She clutched that same gray elephant, its fabric worn thin, and one ear permanently bent. Every few minutes, Halt caught a micro-flinch ripple through her shoulders whenever Trent's bass baritone rolled across the room. Something here was wrong, and the soldier in him felt the subtle pressure of an unseen tripwire. Proceedings trudged forward with the soulless rhythm of a spreadsheet. Trent's solicitor paraded glossy photographs: Amelia feeding goats at a petting farm, Amelia eating ice cream under a flawless summer sky, each image radiating competence and curated joy. Judges and clerks saw evidence of stability. Halt saw the rictus of rehearsed smiles, tiny fists clenched so hard the knuckles blanched. When Trent took the stand, he spoke like a man accepting an industry award: structure, emotional security, developmental milestones. His gaze flicked toward Elena, with weaponized sympathy portraying her grief as volatility and her dwindling savings as parental neglect. Meanwhile, the widow's defense felt like patching hull breaches with masking tape. Her solicitor, overwhelmed and underfunded, offered earnest but threadbare counter-arguments, while Elena's voice tremored the exhaustion of single-parent nights, shortening every sentence. Through it all, Amelia remained motionless, fingers fixed around the elephant's patched belly. Halt recognized the toy instantly. After Harry's funeral, it had vanished from the household, presumed lost in the scramble of storage crates. Yet here it reappeared, tucked beneath a little arm in perfect time to suggest affection between Trent and the child. That coincidence stank worse than diesel-stewed coffee in a Hellman checkpoint. Children of 3 do not sit at parade rest for hours. They fidget, murmur, chase dust motes. Amelia displayed the stillness of someone taught that movement carries consequences. Every observation nudged Halt toward a single, alarming hypothesis. This was not a custody contest, but an orchestrated conditioning, and the elephant was merely one piece of a meticulously staged set. Late afternoons sagged under the weight of paper and pretense when Judge Marmon called a 15-minute recess. Chairs screeched, lawyers huddled, clerks corralled files. Halt rose to stretch, and that was when a whisper cut the room like a clean sniper shot. "Safe, man. The words floated from Amelia scarcely louder than the rustle of a page, yet they arrested every conversation. The guardian leaned in. The judge froze mid-stand. Trent's polished facade flickered. Amelia's tiny finger pointed unerringly across the gallery toward Halt. "Safe man," she repeated louder, granting the phrase courtroom authority. The soldier's pulse slammed. Harry's code had survived in his daughter's memory, embedded deeper than language. Judge Marmon summoned Halt to the stand despite his non-party status. Under oath, he described Amelia's unnatural discipline. The missing elephant, the battlefield promised the significance of safe man. His clipped, precise testimony void of embroidery, rich in first-hand detail, recast the day's narrative. The judge ordered an immediate forensic audit of every document Trent had submitted and suspended further argument. 3 days later, that audit detonated forged birth certificates, counterfeit medical forms, financial statements riddled with metadata tampering, and no genetic link between Trent and Amelia. Court officers cuffed the financier as he hissed about costs and consequences. But the gallery's attention had shifted to Nina, tears of relief carving paths through months of fear, and to Amelia, who at last wriggled off her chair, toddled toward Halt, and nestled beneath his arm, as though returning to a place mapped in her blood. The order for a forensic audit detonated through the courthouse like a depth charge. Judge Marmon adjourned for 72 hours, authorizing digital forensics teams and child protection specialists to comb every document, photo, and affidavit Trent had supplied. While clerks boxed files and marshals posted outside the record room, Halt became an unofficial consultant, answering terse questions about military paperwork, deployment timelines, and the provenance of a certain gray elephant. Sleep came in brief, shallow snatches. Nana crashed on her sister's sofa. Halt dozed in a pub near Whitehall with his back to the wall and the toy in a sealed evidence bag beside his pint. Each hour tightened the net. Metadata on the family snapshots revealed they'd been shot over 2 afternoons with a hired lifestyle photographer. Trent had paid cash, instructing the shooter to make it look candid. The birth certificate bore a registrar's stamp dated on a Sunday when the office was closed. Medical signatures belonged to practitioners who were either retired or dead. Forensic accountants traced shell company money flows nudging into 6 figures, all timed to coincide with Harry Fletcher's death in service payout. And then came the keystone, a storage unit log showing Trent's access logged with the passcode of Graham Fletcher, Harry's estranged brother. CCTV captured Trent exiting the unit with a banker's box that later yielded the elephant's DNA fibers matched to Amelia's infant blanket. Judge Marmon, compiling this mosaic, fashioned a narrative darker than anyone had guessed. Trent had targeted military widows via probate notices, grooming them with financial advice before engineering circumstances to assert kinship and harvest whatever benefits or leverage he could wring from a vulnerable child. Amelia was not the first attempt, merely the one that survived long enough for a soldier to notice. Court reconvened in a chamber now crackling with suppressed outrage. The public gallery had swelled with plainclothes detectives, safeguarding officers, and a crown prosecutor clutching a fresh indictment thicker than the civil case file had ever been. Trent's skin looked waxy under the fluorescence, yet he still tried the practiced smile. It failed to reach even the corners of his mouth. Judge Marmon opened with a calm that sliced cleaner than fury. Forged identity documents, perjury, conspiracy to defraud, child endangerment. Each count landed like a hammer, and with each strike, Trent's solicitor shrank further into his chair until he requested without conviction to withdraw from representation. Marshals escorted Trent out in cuffs. The clatter of the door echoed like final punctuation. The judge then turned to Nana, voice softening, as if the room itself needed gentling. This court restores immediate and sole custody of Amelia Rose Fletcher to her mother. Protective oversight will be provided, but only to assist, never to intrude. A collective exhale filled the chamber. Halt, still on the witness list but no longer required, was nonetheless invited forward. Judge Marmon signed an order naming him special guardian ad litem, an honorary role granting visibility into Amelia's welfare, and the legal standing to intervene if future threats emerged. It was more authority than he had sought, but exactly the leverage Harry would have wanted in the right hands. Outside cameras waited, reporters lobbed questions about a kidnapping ring. Halt deflected with a single statement: "A little girl's going home to her mom." That's the only headline worth printing. Then he placed a guiding hand on Nana's shoulder and cleared a path through the flashbulbs. Autumn settled over Putney and copper and ochre, drawing a quiet curtain between crisis and recovery. Ella Lenina returned to her modest terrace house, finding comfort in the squeak of the garden gate Harry had meant to oil. Holt arrived the next Saturday with a toolbox and fixed it before she could brew the tea. His visits never followed a schedule, sometimes a weekday evening to read Amelia a story, sometimes a Sunday morning wrong that ended conveniently outside their door with pastries in hand, but their irregularity felt natural, like patrols rotating to keep watch unpredictable. Amelia thrived under the new normal. Speech therapy sessions unwound the tight coil of her silence. Nights brought fewer terrors once Holt showed her how to tuck the elephant under the bed as sentry. On one rain-pricked afternoon, she asked in the sudden way of children whether her daddy had been afraid. Holt knelt, met her eyes, and answered truthfully, "We're all afraid. Courage is what you do while you feel it." Then he taught her to braid 2 blades of grass into a loop, a field trick for steady hands, while Alelana watched from the doorway, a small smile easing lines that grief had carved. Months later, as winter lights twinkled across the Thames, Amelia padded into the sitting room, where Holt was tightening a loose window latch. She pressed the newly mended elephant ear stitched straight belly patch, replaced with cheerful floral cloth, into his calloused palm, murmuring, "Safe man keeps it now." Holt's throat tightened, but he merely nodded, setting the toy on the mantel like a regimental mascot. Promises he knew were in the keeping, not the declaring. And somewhere beyond the glass, the city carried on, unaware that in a quiet house, a little girl, a determined mother, and a soldier without uniform had won a war that would never make the news, yet mattered more than any medal. Winter's early darkness wrapped London in slate and sodium when the Metropolitan Police's Economic Crime Squad finally unsealed its case file on Project Nightjar, the codename detectives chose for Oliver Trent's widening fraud web. What began as a single forged birth certificate now sprawled across 4 counties, linking probate notices, forged guardianships, and siphoned trust funds from 3 other military families left scarred by Afghanistan. Alelanina spent long Saturdays at New Scotland Yard, shuffling through photo arrays and bank statement printouts. Her grief hardened into a blade of focus. Holt moved beside her like a shadow, never answering questions, for her merely translating bureaucratic knots into plain speech and sliding cups of machine-burnt coffee across interrogation tables when her voice faltered. Amelia, meanwhile, entered art therapy sessions at a child development clinic near Clapham Common. Crayon lines that once scraped the paper with frantic pressure slowly softened blues and greens, returning to a palette previously dominated by alarm red. Each visit ended with Holt in the waiting room, boot heel bouncing in tiny measured tremors, a soldier's impatience repurposed into paternal vigilance. One frigid afternoon, a CID detective quietly pulled him aside, murmuring that Harry Fletcher's death benefits account had been targeted by Trent within 48 hours of the funeral. Holt's jaw tightened, but he only said, "Then we prove intent, not opportunity." Later, outside beneath a breath-clouded street lamp, Alelanana asked how he stayed so calm. He answered with austere candor, "Out there I learned that panic is a luxury the living can't afford." She exhaled the fog of her breath, mixing with his, and for the first time since Kandahar, he felt the faint release of a century being relieved, if only for a moment. The criminal trial commenced the following spring at Southwark Crown Court, where tabloid cameras loitered like gulls scenting chips. Prosecutors displayed a lattice of forged signatures, shell company ladders, and deep fake photographs so convincingly doctored, the jury audibly gasped when originals appeared beside them. Yet the fulcrum of the case was human. Not digital. Alelanana's steadfast chronology of every phone call Trent had engineered as financial advice, and Holt's crisp testimony outlining military casualty notification protocols proof Trent could never have been named guardian without MOD clearance. He spoke with the clipped precision of parade drill, but when counsel asked why he involved himself at all, his voice dropped lower, rougher, "Because Staff Sergeant Fletcher is still on duty through me." Across the well, Trent's demeanor fractured into visible fissures, fingers drumming a Morse code of dread against the defendant's bench. Amelia was spared the witness box, her recorded play therapy session, instead shown in closed court. When the video reached the moment, she whispered, "Safe man keeps me." 2 jurors wiped tears while the rest sat rigid as stone sentinels. Closing arguments painted Trent as predator and impresario, curating a theater of familial affection to harvest pensions and insurance. Deliberations lasted 6 hours. The verdict thundered guilty on all counts: fraud by false representation, perverting the course of justice, and child endangerment. As the judge pronounced a 14-year custodial sentence, Halt's gaze locked on Trent one last time, not with triumph, but with the steady disengagement of a sapper confirming a bomb has finally been rendered safe. Life afterward did not snap back. It rewove itself, stitch by deliberate stitch. Summer found Alelana enrolling in a counseling program for military families, her nights no longer haunted by legal dread, but by textbooks on trauma-informed care. Halt, demobilized at last, accepted a civilian post with the Defense Transition Service, yet his Fridays remained reserved for Putney. He and Amelia established quiet rituals, polishing the brass letterbox Harry once kicked shut in jest, counting river barges from Hammersmith Bridge, tracing constellations from a back garden telescope. Halt assembled out of surplus optics. On Amelia's 4th birthday, they visited Wellington Barracks for the Coldstream Guards' open day. Scarlet tunics and bearskins dazzled under July sun, but Amelia's proudest grin came when Halt knelt to her eye level and pinned a tiny enamel elephant on her denim jacket, sky blue ear unbent. Mascot of the Safe Corps, he told her, and she saluted with uncoached exuberance. That night, Alelana found the original gray elephant on her daughter's pillow beside a note in block capitals, the handwriting unmistakably military. "Keep this as long as you need, then pass it on. Love, Dad." She traced the dented ear and whisper-stitched patch, realizing Halt had embroidered the message himself in Harry's lettering, an act of devotion so precise it blurred the line between remembrance and resurrection. Outside the window, streetlights flickered like distant signal lamps, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that some promises outlive the men who make them, not as ghosts, but as living vows carried forward by those who refuse to lay them down. Autumn returned with its copper-leaf confetti and dusky London skies, and the little household in Putney settled into rhythms that felt almost ordinary. School shoes lined by the door, lunchboxes packed with scribbled dinosaur notes from Safe Man lesson plans on Alelana's laptop beside mugs of builder's tea, gone cold. Each dawn, Halt left his rented flat near Battersea to report to the Defense Transition Service, where he spent 8 hours navigating paperwork for soldiers who, like him, were learning streets had no blast perimeter. Evenings, he jogged the 4 miles to the Fletcher house, arriving just as porch lights blinked on, so that Amelia's delighted shout parade at 6 o'clock, Sergeant became his unofficial reveille. Therapy milestones marked the calendar: the day Amelia raised a hand unprompted in class, the hour she slept through thunder, without bolting upright, the moment she painted a family portrait that included Halt, not as a looming gray outline, but as bright red stick figure holding an elephant flag. On Remembrance Sunday, they traveled to Whitehall, Amelia, clutching her poppy with priest-like solemnity, while the last post echoed among statues. Halt stood ramrod yet gentle, one palm steadying her small shoulder, when the gun's salute cracked the air. Behind them, Alelana, wearing Harry's service medals on her coat, felt the knot of years loosen as strangers offered silent nods of solidarity rather than pity. That night by the gas fire, Halt unfolded a letter he had written to Harry, but never sent, read it aloud in measured cadence, describing Amelia's courage. Alelana's new studies, the garden gate finally oiled, then burned it in the grate, letting whirls of ash drift upward like signals answered. Across the room, Amelia watched the ember sparks reflected in the elephant's glass button eyes and whispered, "Dad saw that," a declaration delivered with the calm certainty of someone who now believed safety could be permanent. Winter crept in on fog-laden breath, and with it came a new test, and Amelia's night terrors returned, not the mute paralysis of earlier trauma, but full-voice pleas for her father. Instead of retreating, Halt and Alelana created a midnight drill. When Amelia cried out, lights remained, dim voices low, a thermos of cocoa warmed on standby. Halt lifted her palm, broad and steady against her trembling spine, murmuring coordinates of imaginary evacuation routes, north by Garden Gate, east by Moonbeam Corridor, all clear. One night she clutched his collar and asked if monsters ever chased soldiers behind the wire. Halt, after a pause, admitted yes, but soldiers chased back until daylight. Together they designed a memory box. A cedar cigar tin painted NATO green inside went Polaroids of Harry, a service cap badge, Amelia's crayon map of their house labeled Castle, and the elephant's original belly patch, now replaced but kept as relic. Each bedtime, Amelia chose one item, told its story, and tucked it under her pillow, diffusing nightmares into narrative. At the clinic, her therapist reported that retelling built neural pathways stronger than fear. Holt replied with a grunt that meant he already knew field debriefs operated on the same principle. By February, the terrors dwindled to murmurs. When they did flare, Amelia reached for the tin herself before calling anyone evidence that the safe perimeter had migrated from her guardian's arms into her own agency. Elena framed the progress charts on the hallway wall like campaign maps. Holt teased her about decor, but secretly ran a fingertip along the rising trend line each visit, as if confirming coordinates on a mission plan that led not to extraction but to a future unscarred. Years turned in quiet revolutions until spring sunshine found Amelia at 8, gangly and gap-toothed, standing on a primary school stage, delivering a class project titled Promises. She spoke clear and uncoached about her father's oath to protect strangers, her mother's vow to keep loving even when scared, and a man who kept a battlefield promise long after the shooting stopped. In the audience, Holt wore a suit that felt strangely restrictive after years of parade dress, yet his eyes tracked the exits with habitual awareness until Amelia ended her speech by lifting the sky-blue enamel elephant for all to see. Applause scattered across the hall like clattering shell casings, but the clamor inside Holt's ribcage was louder. Afterward, Amelia pressed the pin into his hand. "It's graduation," she declared. "You're off duty." Holt tried to correct her duty, for a promise never truly ends, but words jammed behind the sudden surge of pride and something perilously close to relief. Outside, cherry blossoms drifted onto their shoulders like confetti, and Elena snapped a photo. Amelia mid-laugh, Holt mock saluting with the pin held to his temple, both framed by petals that looked suspiciously like metals scattered from the sky. That image would hang in Amelia's bedroom through adolescence, carried to university, and one day pinned to a hospital isolette, where a newborn's fist would grasp a freshly patched elephant. For even when vows are fulfilled, they echo forward, inviting the next guardian to listen. And somewhere, whether under Afghan stars or London street lamps, Harry Fletcher could be imagined smiling, certain that a single whispered code, entrusted to the right ears, had outlived danger and blossomed into a lineage of safety. Time indifferent to heroics kept ticking until Amelia entered secondary school, taller now, her stride a deliberate echo of the drill square cadence she'd absorbed from Kieran Holt. She wore the sky-blue elephant pin on her satchel, a secret insignia whose origin she guarded like classified intel. For Remembrance Week, her history class invited veterans to speak. Amelia asked Holt, now Deputy Director of the Defense Transition Service, to address them. He tried to refuse. Public speaking raised ghosts, but the look in her eyes overrode caution. The assembly hall smelled of disinfectant and adolescent bravado. Holt stepped to the lectern, broad shoulders still instinctively squared, and told 300 restive teenagers about duty, not the cinematic glory, but the mundane repetition of keeping promises when no one is filming. He spoke of Harry Fletcher without naming the firefight that killed him, of Elena's resilience, and softening his graveled voice of a child who once sat so still that a whole courtroom failed to notice her fear. The hall blurred. Teachers leaned forward. The students who normally flicked at phones beneath desks froze. When he finished, silence hung a beat too long before applause erupted like a volley. Later, Amelia found Holt in the corridor, hands trembling almost imperceptibly. "Safe man gets stage fright," she teased, handing him a canteen coffee. He shrugged. Extraction complete, targets engaged. But his eyes shone the way they had on Kandahar nights, when he dared believe sunrise might arrive without casualties. Word of the talk spread. Parents emailed the head teacher, posted a clip that went modestly viral, and inquiries flooded the transition service from veterans who had never considered civilian mentorship, until a stoic sergeant reminded them they were still on patrol. Only the perimeters had shifted. Holt, uneasy with attention, yet pragmatic, drafted a pilot program linking ex-forces volunteers to schools, dubbing it Operation Elephant, because sometimes metaphors save lives more quietly than armor. Operation Elephant expanded at a clip neither Holt nor Elena foresaw. Within 18 months, the Ministry of Defense granted seed funding. Corporate sponsors added coding workshops and bursaries. Amelia, now 16, created the logo, a stylized elephant silhouette whose bent ear formed a shield. She interned in the summer intake, guiding younger children through obstacle courses disguised as play therapy, teaching them the same grass braid trick Halt once used to steady her hands. Newspapers finally noticed front pages showed a girl in combat boot laces leading a line of kids. Headline: Veterans and Teens Unite to Bridge Invisible Trenches. Reporters pursued the human interest angle, sniffing for trauma, but found robust program metrics instead, and attendance up, bullying incidents down, exam scores climbing among participants. When asked why the mascot's ear was straightened, Amelia answered, "Because healing isn't on erasing the scar, it's reinforcing it until it carries weight." Meanwhile, Trent filed for parole. The Crown prosecutor consulted Halt and Elena, who attended the hearing not out of vengeance but vigilance. The board denied release, citing psychological assessments that described Trent's remorse as instrumental. Outside the prison gates, Halt inhaled winter air sharp as bayonet steel and realized the knot that once tethered him to Trent's shadow had finally slipped. That evening, the three-soldier widow teenager walked the South Bank lights from the eye rippling along the Thames. Elena, her counseling practice thriving, threaded an arm through Halt's. "Mission nearly over?" she asked. He considered the carnival glow, the girl ahead spinning under fairy lights, the flow of passers-by, safe in their small stories. "No," he said, after a beat voice, quiet. "Mission evolving." Amelia's university acceptance arrived on a breezy April morning, the envelope stamped with the crest of King's College London War Studies and Psychology dual degree. She sprinted across the garden, still dewy from dawn, and collided with Halt, knocking a wrench from his hand. He was predictably fixing the shedlock he'd already repaired twice. Laughter ricocheted off brick walls as she waved the letter like a signal flag. Elena burst through the back door, kettle, forgotten tears, and triumph mingling. They read the words together, a trident of hands gripping the paper as if it might fly away. That night, they celebrated at a small Italian restaurant where Harry once reserved a corner table each leave. A candle flickered. The air smelled of basil and new beginnings. Amelia raised her glass of sparkling lemonade. "To promises kept," she said, gaze steady on Halt. He answered with, "Water soldiers' toasts are sober," and added, "And to promises handed forward." Months later, move-in day dawned. The packed car brimmed with textbooks, and a battered elephant zipped into a clear protective pouch. Outside the dormitory, Halt lifted the toy, eyebrow arched. Amelia grinned. "Regimental standard," she declared, tucking it onto the shelf above her desk. Before he left, Halt placed a slender metal box beside it. "Cedar NATO green memory tin version 2. Add new coordinates," he instructed. She hugged him hard enough to imprint. As he walked back to the car, Elena at his side, sun rising over Waterloo's silhouette, Halt felt a strange light ache of successful withdrawal, like stepping off parade, knowing the colors are safe in younger hands. He did not look back. He did not need to. For somewhere behind him, a dorm room echoed with a father's code word, a mother's laughter, and the soft rustle of an elephant's unbent ear, all testifying that vigilance once seated can grow into a forest of guardians. And in that quiet certainty, the safe man finally stood down, not from duty, but into the peace earned only by those who have kept watch until the dawn. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Your support truly means the world to me. If this video brought you value or resonated with you in any way, feel free to leave a little comment or hit subscribe so we can keep sharing more moments together. See you in the next one.